I guess your clustering worked. Yay! It worked, and if it didn't, please make sure to ask your questions in the box next to the video. We are now going to check what actually happens, and we're going to check automatically, or we're going to monitor what happens in our running installation. There's a couple of options that you have to monitor Liferay, and well, to spoiler a little bit, this will be a rather theoretical chapter where I'll give you some of the options that you have, but actually executing them, actually configuring them is up to you, because I don't know what your environment is, which environment you're in, and what suits your needs best. So let's go into the options that you have for monitoring. First of all, you probably have some monitoring anyways. What's up with your network, with network congestion? What's up with your load balancer, your web server? And you have guessed it, this is Liferay DevOps, this is not load balancer DevOps. So you probably have something there anyways, which tells you that yes, you are under high load, or you're under low load, or you have long running requests, or you have very short running requests, and your answering time is this. You can have that, and this plays very well together with Liferay, and we have some examples on the next slide, I believe. Application performance management or monitoring is the next one. You can look at your JVM. When I say on the load balancer side, do you have long running requests? What's your typical answering time? That's one. Why do you have a long running request? Is that network congestion? Is that the CPU of your application server that is working at its limit? Is that the memory that is working at its limit? Is that the database? This is all of the monitoring that you want to have in order to see why your system behaves in a certain way. If you want to go for performance tuning, for just getting the last bit of performance out of your running installation, you better know where your biggest problem is. The quick summary of performance tuning is always find your first and worst bottleneck, fix it, and then measure again, because your problem number 2 most likely will have gotten a promotion to be the new number 1. And you rinse and repeat and do that until you're either happy with the performance or until you finally find out it's not really worth getting 2% more of performance out of the next step. I'd rather add another machine. The next one is user monitoring. You can, or you may be interested in what does your user actually do here. What do they do? How do they behave? And that is rather on the content side, but we are in a gray zone here. Is that just the sheer number of users that are coming, or is this what the users actually do on your platform? If you really want to know what your users do on the platform, I'd like to just point you to Liferay Analytics Cloud, where you can interface with our offer in the cloud, where your user segments can be filtered, visualized, and maintained in a very advanced way, not just local to your server, but also with an external monitoring, where you have your own environment in our cloud. And that can help you with A/B testing, that can help you with segmenting your users based on behavior, which also works locally, but is enhanced in the cloud offering, Analytics Cloud. Again, this is beyond DevOps, so I'll just mention it here. And then going into the behavior monitoring, what are users actually doing? How are they operating on the system? This is what you probably want to keep an eye on. Now, assume you are tuning the system. You want to know, where do I lose my performance, or where does it go? What do I need to do? Then you have a couple of methods. There are, for one, the very basic ones, JConsole. This interfaces with Liferay or with the JVM, with a Java virtual machine, on a very low level. And lots of information in Liferay is published through the JMX beans, which means if you're interested in your cache, How is your cache utilization? How is the hit rate? How is the memory consumption of your cache? You will figure that out through the JMX beans. Same if you are dealing with your database connection, with your connection pool. How well is that utilized? Or are there any threads waiting for a database connection? Who is waiting for whom? Just provide your database connection pool from the application server and it will be in the monitoring in the JMX beans as well. JConsole is a very nice tool to just have a quick view into your JVM. Same thing with memory consumption. You can easily identify memory leaks just by looking at the memory curve in JConsole. Typically memory goes up, up and up and up, and finally hits the limit, and there you'll see must be some memory leak in there. Now which one it is, JConsole is not the tool to figure out which of the components causes your memory leak, but there you can choose any of the other tools. We have two more tools named here, Java Mission Control and Java Flight Recorder. I'll just point blank admit I haven't used them yet, so if you know them, use them, feel free to use them, otherwise look them up if they might be able to help you. One of the prime tools that I always see for finding out or figuring out memory leaks are profilers. So if you go with a profiler, then you can't run the high load, but you can easily figure out where your memory consumption happens. Another set of tools are the whole application lifecycle management tools like YourKit, New Relic, Dynatrace, AppDynamics that you can just interface with your server, with your JVM, and with Liferay. For some of them, we have agents in there that know more about Liferay, and they will give you deep insight into the running virtual machine, into the answering times of your threads. They will also have an agent for your web server, so you will see how long your requests take. You will see when performance goes down, and they will show you some deviations from the average and might be able to warn you before somebody else tells you something is wrong with your site, performance went down. And I remember I've had an interview with one of our consultants, that's actually a couple of years ago on one of the previous versions, where he's been giving some impressions on his experiences with these application lifecycle management tools. As I said, it's a couple of years ago. It was on Radio Liferay, and there was the episode with Brett Swaim that I've had there. But, well, your mileage may vary, and all of these tools have developed further. I don't know which tool would be the current hot iron that we just recommend, but any of these work. If you have them anyways, feel free to use them. They typically know quite well how to interface with a Java virtual machine, and some of them more, some of them less, but if you have them anyways, you don't need to have all of them. With the user habits on the site, you want to know answering times. You might want to know what users are looking at, and you might want to know what users are not looking at. Now here we go more into the content side, and this is where I can point you again to Analytics Cloud. And you may want to know if there is any content that nobody should access. How does it say here? You also want to know if there is information being accessed improperly. Is there content that is supposed to require credentials that is being accessed without those credentials? Well, if you keep an eye over which URLs are requested from where, you might have an idea on what's appropriate and what's not. We have several customers who are running an intranet as well as an extranet or an internet site on the same platform, on the same portal, and that just works. But you got to keep an eye on all of the URLs that get served from the machine so that you have an idea of what happens and what is requested from where. It typically makes sense to just keep an eye on this. But what we didn't mention in this chapter, or at least not a lot, is the classic monitoring sites like Google Analytics or Piwik. Yes, Liferay interfaces with them. You can just enter your Google Analytics ID or a pwig script that will be embedded on every single site. And with them, you can easily run an external statistics on accesses to your site, which page gets requested, and so on, and where do your users actually spend time. That's very trivial. Especially when we talk about monitoring the system, you want to pay attention to the logs. Some of the logs you can see just on standard out. If you start the Docker container and you don't detach it into the background, you will see that you'll have a lot of logs that just get piped to the standard out channel, but there's also some logs in the application server, so Liferay Home, in our case Tomcat, and then there's a logs, and we have some application or Liferay specific logs in Liferay Home logs. Now careful, the Docker images that we have built will have this as a transient directory. So as soon as you shut down your Docker container, the logs are gone. You may want to configure your logs to go to a different, into a different direction, not onto a transient file. Or before you shut it down, take a look at your logs and then shut down. Now that's a function of our simplification of the Docker setup in this training. That's not the recommendation to have it in the running system, in the production system. And you will need the logs if you discover anything and you open a ticket with our support team. Most likely they will ask you for the logs. And it's the first thing you should look at. If something is going wrong, somebody can't log in. Why? Well, check the logs first. Maybe it says your LDAP server is not available. If you know which component in Liferay is responsible for some output and you don't see that output, and maybe you see the source code of that component, then you may want to switch on an extended logging. If you go to the control panel in server administration, you find a logs category, log file category, and in there you can configure different log levels for various components. And as you see here, the little image on this slide contains the choices. They go per Java package, and you can easily just change from error, which just would log errors, to info, debug, trace, which will be very chatty. Typically, well, you will use them if you know what you're looking for, which is the message that I'm looking for, and then with that message you see, hey, this is a debug output. Then you switch it to debug. Now the nice part when you, or the nice feature of this logging interface, let me go to the site here. So when I go to control panel, server administration and log levels, there I have all of these different Java packages, and you see there's quite a lot of them. And let's say I want to use these dynamic data lists, and I know that I'm not interested in error, but I'm interested in the debug level of this Java package. I can switch to debug and save. And once I've configured this, it's active until the next restart, which means, yes, now I'll get more information in the log files, but it won't be forever. I won't log megabytes or gigabytes forever, but just until the next restart, which is very nice to be transient, to just give support some extra information, switch on this category, give us the information, and if you forget to switch it back, sooner or later you'll restart anyways, and then you're good to go.
The question is, when we are working in a cluster, this only affects one node, do it?
That's a hard question. The question is, does this only affect one machine in the cluster or the whole cluster? I believe it's only one machine, because this should be only one machine. That's my expectation. 99%, but actually, I admit I didn't try that. but it should just be one machine. So be aware which cluster node you're on, and as we have all configured the settings, down here you'll see I even have a pointer of the node just on the bottom of my page, because I have configured and we have configured in the previous exercise to display the node that we're currently on. And I believe I have just accessed this site through its direct IP, not through the load balancer. So yes, I believe it's only one machine. And that's the very basic overview, the very theoretical overview over the monitoring tools that you can configure with Liferay. To summarize, it's up to you how much monitoring you want, but if you run into problems, you probably want some more monitoring. Definitely you'll want some overview over your cache utilization, especially if you're running into performance problems. If you want to tune your system to be proper, the default cache configuration in Liferay means that the cache is timed out after 10 minutes. So don't access some piece of content for 10 minutes and it's being thrown out of the cache, which is typically fine, because if you really frequently request it, then it will stay in the cache forever. And if you only rarely request it, then it might as well be fetched from the database. Doesn't really matter. And that's basically also one of the features that I see whenever I'm talking to a customer who has not set up their clustering correctly. I've mentioned that in a previous chapter. When they say, no, clustering works, because eventually we'll see all of the correct content on all nodes, that's precisely a function of this. After 10 minutes of not accessing a piece of content, it will be phased out of the cache anyways, and then loaded from database. So eventually, yes, you'll see all of the content, all of the correct content. But that's only eventually. That's not immediately. Any other ideas for tools that you might want to use for monitoring? I'd say anything that you come up with is a correct answer. So if you have another tool and you want to know, can I use this? And it's a tool that interfaces with a virtual machine, with a database, with a web server, with the network infrastructure. Yeah, use it. We don't mandate it's these tools or else or nothing else, but whatever you are running in your network that gives you confidence in knowing what's up there, that's fine, totally fine. And that's what I have to say about monitoring.